Hey there. Tonight we're setting out on a slow, peaceful journey. You're not in a hurry. You're not checking your phone. You're not thinking about tomorrow's calendar. Instead, you're somewhere entirely different, a place that moves like a soft breeze over tall grass, where the light slants golden and the air smells faintly of sun-warmed stone and green fig leaves. Imagine a gentle hill above an old Roman villa. Below, terracotta rooftops bask in the late afternoon sun. There's no urgency in this world, just stillness, and the way the shadows stretch a little longer every minute. The earth beneath you is warm. You hear the distant murmur of a fountain, constant, low and comforting. A bee drones by slowly, lazily, as if it too had forgotten any reason to rush. To your left, a lone cypress leans slightly with age, its trunk twisted with time. To your right, a fig tree's wide leaves cast soft, dappled shade across a nearby stone bench. But the real show is above overhead. The sky is a canvas in motion. Clouds meander across it, thick and puffy, thin and wispy, some like stretched cotton, others like swirls in cream. And you're just watching them. And let's be honest, even finding the comfiest pillow doesn't guarantee you'll stay awake for this. So, before you fully relax, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy this peaceful corner of the internet. We love knowing who's joining us from where, so drop your location and local time in the comments if you'd like. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's drift gently into tonight's story together. You walk slowly through waist-high grasses, brushing the soft, fragrant stems with your fingers. The sun is warm on your skin, but never harsh. It feels like the kind of light that's been waiting all day to fall just right. Each step is padded and quiet, your sandals pressing into earth that remembers many centuries of footsteps before yours. Ahead, nestled into the slope, sits the old villa. Its walls are sun-faded ochre. You pass between two worn pillar sunts white, now blushed with the faintest pink, and step into a world held gently by time. Inside, quiet reigns. The sound of your steps shifts to a faint echo on smooth stone. A painted fresco glows dimly along one wall, green laurels, a river nymph, perhaps a dolphin, and you catch the scent of something herbal and sweet, like lavender stored in a clay jar. The air here is slow, cool. A man greets you not with a word, but with a nod, a kind of quiet that says, "We speak only when we feel like it here." His name is Lucius. His tunic is loose, pale, and a little worn at the edges, and his eyes smile before his mouth ever does. He gestures with one hand, and then looks up, as if offering a kind of welcome that's directed more at the clouds than at you. You look up again. Yes, still those clouds. He walks with you back outside to that sun-warmed bench. You sit. He sits. The moment is full, yet needs nothing. Lucius points at a particular cloud, a slow-moving, almost rectangular one, and hums thoughtfully. "You see that one?" he says softly. "We call those ovis plumae, sheep feather clouds, the type that carry no weather, no warning, just company." He reaches down beside the bench and lifts a small clay tablet, smooth as a river stone. Etched lines form tidy rows. He traces them gently with one finger. "I count clouds," he says, voice like worn linen. "Not because they need counting, just because I like noticing." The clay is cool, and beside it lies a reed stylus, sharpened carefully. He shows you how he marks them. a small curve for every wispy one. A small square for the thicker, meandering types. Some marks are so faint, you imagine the clay may one day forget them altogether. You lean back. Time loosens its grip. Here in this gentle, forgotten corner of the world, counting clouds isn't strange. It's the sort of pastime that people grow into, like whistling with reeds, or guessing how long it will take the ivy to reach the next stone. Lucius chuckles lightly. You wouldn't believe how many names we've given to clouds. My uncle swore some were shaped like the helmets of sleepy centurions. Others looked like dinner loaves. Once, he claimed he saw a sheep giving advice to a senator. And just like that, you feel it. A flicker of delight without the need to laugh. A kind of softness behind the eyes. Even the absurd here feels meditative. Around you, bees hum over rosemary. A lizard stretches in the warmth. The wind picks up only slightly, just enough to cause a rustle that sounds like a lullaby written in leaves. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine what it would be like to spend every afternoon like this. Not chasing the hours, but walking beside them. Like old friends who don't speak much anymore but still find comfort in each other's pace. Above, a hawk calls far off, faint. It's the only voice in the sky. And Lucius, beside you, hums an old tune under his breath. You don't recognize it, but it feels familiar. Something between a lullaby and a breeze. You're not sure how long you sit there. Could be 10 minutes, could be 40. But when you open your eyes again, a different cloud has taken center stage, a long, twisting form that looks just slightly like a curled-up dog. I call that one Canis Somni, Lucius says with a grin. Sleep dog follows us around up there, wagging its tail through the sky. He gently marks another symbol on the clay. The reed scratches faintly. You lean back once more. Scholars still wonder why certain small traditions like cloud counting, breeze naming, herb gazing quietly vanished. No wars ended them. No laws banned them. They just drifted away. But here, in this garden of soft afternoons and feathered skies, they live again, if only for a while. And you're a part of it. The sunlight shifts just slightly as you and Lucius rise from the bench, moving together with the slow rhythm of the afternoon. He doesn't hurry, he never does, and you find yourself falling into step with his easy pace. There's something comforting about his silence, the way it holds space without ever needing to fill it. He leads you down a narrow stone path, the edges softened by time and creeping time. The little leaves brush your ankles and release a faint, centerthy floral, a bit lemony. You breathe in slowly. Even the air seems to want a nap. Lucius doesn't say much, but when he speaks, it's always worth the wait. I used to serve in the treasury, he murmurs at last. Spreadsheets of silver, ledgers for grain shipments. Important work, they said. He stops beside a potted olive tree, its twisted trunk bent like a thinker in mid-thought. But after a while, he continues, eyes following a drifting cloud, you realize most things can wait. Clouds don't keep ledgers, and they seem to do fine. He smiles. You nod. There's a kind of quiet pride in him, not boastful, but serene. This is a man who's worked, yes, who's kept order in the coins and counted the weights of stone, but who now understands the value of slow hours and unmeasured time. He has chosen not to fill his days, but to let them be. You follow him to the back of the villa where the shade grows deeper. A low stone wall, covered with creeping vines, encloses a modest courtyard. Here, Wild poppies sway beside cultivated rosemary, and bees dance lazily above soft blue borage. Lucius gestures to a small wooden bench tucked under a flowering pergola. You sit again, because that's what this day invites you to Dorist. Listen and notice. A clay bowl sits nearby, half filled with water, and floating on it are tiny flower petals, not as a ritual, not for meaning, but simply because Lucius enjoys the sight. When I retired, he says, leaning back, I decided I wanted to do nothing very well. You glance at him. People always ask, don't you get bored? He chuckles softly, brushing his hand across the stone ledge. But boredom only visits those who ignore the little things. The texture of moss, the sound of one frog, the shape of this very shadow. You look down. The shadow of the pergola lies draped across your feet like soft netting, a lazy lace made of sunshine. Far off, a bird calls once, then is silent. Lucius stands and walks over to a low shelf carved into the stone wall. Upon it sits a handful of curious objects. A smooth piece of glass worn by the sea, a tiny bell made of bronze, a feather long and striped. He picks up the bell and shakes it gently. It barely makes a sound, more suggestion than note. Found this near the coast, he says. They say it once belonged to a shrine, but now it just reminds me to breathe slowly. The feather, too, has a story. A messenger hawk dropped this one mid-glide. Took me half an hour to find where it landed. Worth it. You can't help but smile. There's no ambition here. No list, no prize. Just the quiet reward of noticing. Behind him, a grapevine curls itself around a column, climbing patiently toward the light. Its small green fruits hang like thoughts not yet fully formed. Lucius turns toward you again. You know, he says, even in the days of Cicero, not everyone was busy giving speeches. Some of us just watched ants, or tracked the movement of our own shadows, or listened to a single flute echo across the hills. He laughs lightly, shaking his head as if amused by the memory of an entire civilization that once moved both furiously and gently, all at once. A breeze picks up, carrying with it the scent of ripe figs and warm dust. It brushes across your face like a hand that knows you're almost ready to nap, but not quite. Lucius places the tiny bell back on the shelf with care, then lifts a small woven basket. Would you like a fig? He asks. Inside the basket are 6 or 7 perfect fruits, dark purple, nearly black, with tiny green stems. He offers one to you. You bite into it, and the flavor is slow sweet, earthy, a little like honey left on a warm plate. It melts without fanfare. You can eat fast, Lucius says, but the fig won't change its pace for you. You laugh, not out loud, but somewhere inside. As you finish the fig, you lean back, and Lucius places the basket down. For a moment, the two of you sit in silence, and it's the kind that doesn't feel empty, it feels rested. He looks up again. There's a cloud I always look for, he says. Comes every few weeks. Long, stretched out, always at the same angle. My uncle used to call it Librarius Nubilus the Scribe Cloud, like it's writing something in the sky, but only the sky can read it. You look up. Today, the cloud isn't there. But the thought of it lingers. Maybe next week, he adds. You imagine people across time, doing the same Romans long gone, standing in similar gardens, holding figs, looking up and hoping their favorite cloud might return. And maybe it did, or maybe it didn't, but they kept watching. Scholars still wonder why the Romans, so famously industrious, spent so much time on poetry, gardening, and personal letters. But here, beside Lucius, it's not a mystery. It's the natural result of being somewhere beautiful and letting yourself belong to the slow hours. He stands again, stretches, and grins. "Come," he says. The garden has more corners than most people ever find. And just like that, you rise too, your steps light, your limbs relaxed, and your heart strangely glad for the quiet man who counts clouds and once chased a feather through an olive grove. Lucius leads you along a narrow gravel path, each footstep soft and satisfying. The pebbles make the faintest of sounds, like dry leaves rustling in the breeze. To your left, a row of low stone arches frames glimpses of olive trees beyond, their silvery green leaves glinting gently in the sun. Ahead lies a small pergola, laced with climbing vines, and beneath it, a low marble table catching speckles of light. It's here that Lucius keeps his favorite pastamia, simple clay tablet, a reed stylus, and a handful of smooth pebbles used not for any game, but for marking time in a way that has nothing to do with hours or minutes. He sits down and gestures for you to do the same. The bench is wide and worn, smooth by years of use. You can almost feel the memory of other hands, other afternoons, pressed into the stone. With the tablet resting in his lap, Lucius begins his work not in a formal sense, but in the way someone might slowly pet a sleeping cat, gentle, unrushed, and entirely for his own enjoyment. There are 5 types I mark, he says, cirrus, cumulus, stratus, and 2 more I made up myself. He grins. Fumus the smoky kind, and tardust the ones that barely move at all. You watch as he uses the stylus to gently etch tiny curves and slashes into the clay's soft surface. It's not dry yet. It will be left in the sun later, he explains, to harden just enough for the impressions to last through the season. Not forever, just long enough. Each symbol is small, precise, and utterly without hurry. Some days I only count 1, he adds. Other days 10 or 12. Depends how long I sit here. Depends how many stories the sky wants to tell. You look up. The sky this afternoon is a wide, faded blue, like linen that's been washed many times. Across it float 3 distinct clouds sewn like a teardrop, one like a folded scroll, and one that looks, somehow, like a fish with very little ambition. You point. That one, Lucius says with a nod, is definitely a TARDIS. Been drifting there since midday. I rather like the ones that don't seem to know where they're going. He marks it slowly. A soft breeze stirs the leaves above, sending a few dried petals spinning gently down onto the table. One lands beside the tablet, its faded red edges curling inwards like a sleeping moth. You pick it up, hold it between your fingers. It's dry, fragile, and lighter than the cloud you just watched, yet somehow heavier in your hand than you'd expect. Lucius notices and smiles. That one's from the pomegranate tree. Blooms early, drops its petals without fuss. You look again at the petal, then back at the clouds. The moment stretches out not dramatically, but like a cat elongating in a sunny patch of floor. Nothing urgent, nothing needing attention, just the slow unfurling of time. Lucius reaches into a small pouch beside the table and removes a tiny sponge, damp with water and scented faintly of rosemary. He wipes the stylus clean, then dabs the corners of the tablet gently, preserving only today's marks and fading the old ones that have blurred with age. This isn't about keeping records, he says. It's about remembering to look up. You think about that. How often do you look up, not just glance, but really look? At the way the light shifts behind the leaves? At the way clouds stretch and shrink, form and fade, with no intention but their own? Lucius offers you the stylus. Try. You hesitate, then take it. The reed is soft at the tip, worn just enough to feel smooth between your fingers. He turns the tablet slightly, offering a fresh patch of clay. You mimic his mark's careful curves and quiet slashes. Yours are more hesitant, slightly off balance. But Lucius nods approvingly. Excellent, TARDIS. You've got a good eye for cloud temperaments. You laugh softly. There's something deeply satisfying in the act. Not because it produces anything useful, but because it lets you be somewhere fully, completely, without the weight of expectation. Beneath the pergola, the vines sway gently overhead. Their tendrils cast lacy shadows across the table, and you trace one with your fingertip, watching as the shadow moves ever so slightly with the passing breeze. Lucius leans back and closes his eyes for a moment. Some days, he says dreamily, I wonder if clouds keep track of us. If maybe there's one up there who knows. Ah yes, that's the one who named me after a dog. You look up again, and it's too easy to imagine the sky as a gentle observer, watching back. A lazy, benevolent giant just drifting past, enjoying the scent of fig trees and old rosemary. He continues. Once, a friend of mine tried to organize a neighborhood cloud, counting league. Thought we'd have scorecards, maybe even laurel crowns for the weekly winner. You raise an eyebrow. It lasted 3 days, Lucius says with a chuckle. Turns out competitive cloud. Watching defeats the point. The stylus still rests in your hand. You make another small mark, this one just a dot, for the sake of it. Maybe for a cloud that hasn't appeared yet. Lucius glances down, then back at you. That one, he says, looks like a beginning. You smile. In a world where so many things demand conclusions, deadlines, and deliverables, it's strangely comforting to sit beneath a sky that offers none of those. Just movement, just softness, just the quiet unfolding of things that have no name until you give them on an even, then only gently. Scholars still ponder what daily Roman leisure truly looked like. Most focus on festivals or public baths, but some suspect quietly, in footnotes and passing essays, that a certain kind of man somewhere once sat with a clay tablet and a reed stylus, simply enjoying the sky. Here, with Lucius, it doesn't feel like speculation. It feels like truth, or maybe just something better, a peaceful, patient possibility. The breeze picks up again, cool and kind. You sit back, stylus in hand, and let your eyes wander up to the drifting heavens, where every cloud carries a soft whisper of stories told for no reason but pleasure. You walk with Lucius through a narrow archway, ducking just slightly beneath a hanging cluster of trailing ivy. The leaves brush against your shoulder, cool, velvety, and damp with shade. On the other side, the world opens up again into a quiet courtyard garden, enclosed by low walls and draped in soft green. This is Lucius's garden of gentle experiments. It isn't grand. There are no statues, no elaborate hedges or ostentatious fountains. Instead, it's a place where small things grow because they are allowed to, and where the purpose of each plant isn't utility, but simply presence. He walks slowly ahead, pointing to beds of wild mint and marjoram, then to a patch of low-growing chamomile, its tiny white flowers half lost in the thick green. Most people grow these for salves or teas, he says. I grow them because I like how they smell when I brush past. He reaches down, trails his fingers gently through the mint, then lifts them to his nose with a pleased sigh. And besides, he adds, they make the bees happy. The bees are, indeed, happy. One lands on a lavender stalk nearby, wobbling slightly under its own fuzzy weight. It hums for a moment, then floats lazily away, unbothered by your presence. Lucius shows you a bed of thyme planted in the shape of a spiral knot. Perfect, not exact, but pleasing to the eye. That was a morning project, he says, rubbing the back of his neck. Had a thought while watching a snail crawl across the porch. Thought to myself, what if a garden could echo that slow little journey? So I built one. He chuckles lightly. Not everything here is intentional, though. Some things have arrived of their own accord, wild poppies blooming in the corners, a trailing vine with no name climbing up the garden wall. Lucius lets them stay. Gardens, he says, should surprise you a little. Otherwise, they're just green rooms. You nod, following him along the winding path through the beds. There's something unspoken about the way he moves through this spaces, if he's not tending to it, but conversing with it. He pauses beside a small tree with soft, feathery leaves. You don't recognize it. Tamarisk, he explains. They say the Persians used to plant it near sacred springs. I'm not Persian, but I liked the sound of that. He flicks a bit of dust from one of the leaves. This one's a bit stubborn. Takes its time. He says this like it's a compliment. The garden continues around the edge of the villa, and as you follow the curve, you come across a small bench carved directly into the stone wall, nearly hidden behind a curtain of jasmine. Lucius gestures for you to sit. You do. From here, the garden feels even quieter. A breeze drifts through the jasmine, releasing a perfume so soft you might miss it if you weren't already still. He sits beside you and pulls something from a pouch at his side. A folded parchment. A drawing, he says, of a leaf I saw once in Alexandria. Couldn't identify it. Still can't. He unfolds it. The leaf is carefully sketched, its shape wide at the base, tapering into a curl at the tip, with dozens of delicate veins branching out like a river delta. I spent 3 afternoons trying to draw it, he admits. Not because I needed to, just because I wanted to remember how it felt to look at it. He folds the paper again and tucks it away. Some people paint the wars, others the emperors. Me? I draw leaves, much less stressful. You laugh softly, but not because it's funny, because it's true. Here, even the act of sketching seems like a meditation, a way to slow the hands until the mind follows. Lucius stands again, brushing the dust from his tunic, and points toward the back wall where an odd-looking contraption sits half-buried in ivy. You walk over together. It's a set of stacked terracotta jars, each one with a different herb planted in its hollowed top. They cascade down like a gentle fountain of greens. Didn't quite work the way I imagined, he confesses. Meant to be self-watering. Turns out water doesn't always listen to design. You both grin. Still, the herbs thrive. Lemon balm tumbles over the edges. Tiny spearmint leaves peek through cracks. A sprig of oregano reaches upward, as if waving hello. Lucius crouches to touch the soil in the top jar, then leans back on his heels. Every now and then, I pretend I'm a plant, he says. Wouldn't that be nice? Just sit in the sun. Drink when it rains. No meetings. You smile again. It's not hard to imagine Lucius as a content little basil plant soaking in the day. As you wander slowly back through the garden, he points out the final cornera square of soft grass shaded by a loquat tree. "This is the thinking patch," he says. "Except most of the time I don't think very hard." You both step onto the grass, cool underfoot. A small stone is nestled in its center, smooth, round, and just the right size to sit on if you're thinking, or not thinking. Lucius doesn't sit. Instead, he folds his arms behind his back and looks upward again. 3 birds circle slowly overhead, wings catching the sun. "Some days," he says, "I wonder if the garden watches me. Maybe I'm the one growing slow and leafy, and they're all just observing." You stand beside him in silence, the grass beneath you soft and springy. Scholars still wonder what Roman gardens meant to their owner status symbols, healing spaces, statements of taste. But Lucius, with his spiral time and unsent letters, shows you something simpler. Maybe a garden can just be a place to pause, a place for things to unfold, like leaves, like thoughts, like you. The sun has shifted. It's no longer overhead, but leaning gently to one side, casting golden slants across the villa walls and setting the rosemary into a soft glow. You feel its warmth on your shoulders, never hot, just present like a gentle hand resting there, neither urging nor restraining, simply there. Lucius walks ahead of you toward a shaded alcove lined with ivy and grapevines. At its center, a low table sits beneath a linen canopy. The corners are tied to poles wrapped in flowering vines, and one has begun to unravel slightly, fluttering in the breeze. "This," he says, "is where I eat slowly." You step into the shade with him. The air here is a few degrees cooler, scented with crushed basil and something faintly sweet-honey, maybe, or ripe melon. A young servant barefoot, smiling softly, appears from behind a curtain and sets a tray on the table without a word. Then she vanishes again, as if carried away by the breeze. Lucius waves his hand in quiet approval. "She knows," he says. "We don't rush." You take a seat across from him on a cushion so soft it makes your knees forget they were ever stiff. The table is laid with small clay dishes, nothing heavy or elaborate, just simple, generous offerings. Sliced fig, a wedge of soft cheese, the kind that practically melts if you look at it too long, a bowl of chilled barley mixed with fresh herbs and olive oil, warm flatbread wrapped in linen, and in the center, a clay jug sweating faintly in the afternoon heat. Lucius pours you each a cup, half wine, half spring water, cooled with a sprig of mint. "This wine came from a friend," he says. "The water came from the hills. The mint, well, the mint planted itself." You sip slowly. It's the kind of taste that takes its time to explain its light, earthy, faintly sweet. Nothing rushes to the tongue. You let it unfold. Lucius picks up a fig slice and places it on a bit of bread, then adds a curl of cheese. He doesn't eat it right away. He just admires it for a moment, like a tiny edible mosaic. "You know," he says, "some people think of meals as interruptions. I think of them as pauses." He takes a bite. It's quiet for a long time. Not a silence that asks to be filled, but one that invites your breath to match it. Outside the canopy, bees drift past. A butterfly lands on a nearby grape leaf, flutters its wings once, then rests. You try the barley. It's cool and fragrant, with a crunch of pine nuts and a whisper of lemon. Lucius notices your delight and nods. "Greek recipe," he says. "But I changed it, left out the garlic. Too forward for afternoons." You smile. It's true, this isn't a time for boldness. This is a meal made for listening to yourself chew. Nearby, a cicada begins its long rhythmic chant. Not loud, just there. A background hum to fill the spaces between bites. Lucius refills your cup. The wine this time has a faint blush to it, like the last pink of a sunset. You wonder if that's deliberate. He notices your glance. "We press grapes by hand," he says. "Sometimes they blush when you're too gentle." You laugh quietly. One by one, the dishes begin to disappear, not quickly, but slowly, as if you're both eating in real time with the day. Lucius savors each bite, sometimes pausing mid-chew to look up at the shifting leaves above. You follow his gaze. The light dances through them, making little flickering pools on the linen canopy. It's like watching a dream slowly rearrange itself. After a while, Lucius leans back and folds his hands behind his head. "I once had a guest," he says, eyes closed, "who asked why I didn't eat faster, so we could get to the real conversation." He chuckles. "I told him this is the real conversation." You lean back too, feeling the soft pillow behind you cradle your neck. A breeze lifts the edge of the tablecloth, then lets it fall again. On the table, only crumbs remain. The servant reappears, this time with a tiny bowl of chilled fruit melon, peach, and fig again cut into neat little cubes, as if each were a miniature world of its own. You share them, one piece at a time. Melon melts, peach lingers, fig is the encore. Lucius sets his bowl down and says, "There's something important about eating in a way that lets you hear yourself think." He turns toward the open side of the alcove, where the garden waits beyond. The Greeks used to say that food shared without words was a gift to the gods. I think they just didn't want to ruin a good meal with talking. There's a long pause. Somewhere in the distance, a door creaks softly. A bird flutters off. The fig leaves above shift their positions slightly, as if tucking themselves in. Lucius sighs not out of tiredness, but out of deep satisfaction. The kind that only comes when nothing else is expected of you. Scholars still argue about what Romans ate, which recipes were authentic, which meals were for slaves or senators. But there's something timeless in this shaded table, this unhurried food, this simple clay cup sweating in the sun. It isn't a feast. It's a conversation between the day and your senses, a meal that ends only when you both agree it's time. Lucius lifts the last piece of bread, brushes a crumb from it, then places it on the edge of the plate and leans back once more. "Sometimes," he says softly, "I think the clouds get jealous." You follow his gaze upward again, and sure enough, there they are. 3 lazy drifters, one shaped like a loaf, one like a ladle, and one, strangely, like a nap. You wonder what mark he'll give them later, after your long, unhurried meal. Lucius stands with a satisfied scythe, the kind that travels all the way from his sandals to his shoulders. He stretches slightly, his arms reaching toward the canopy overhead, fingers brushing the shadows of the grape leaves. Then, without saying a word, he walks. You follow. The path you take this time leads away from the garden's softness and toward the edge of the villa grounds. It's quieter here, if that's even possible. The stillness is thicker somehow, as though the air itself has been holding its breath. Lucius points upward. You feel that? And yes, you do. A breeze, barely there, Warm, round, and deliberate, as if it has chosen this very moment to arrive. It sweeps through the olive trees with a sigh, brushes your cheek like the memory of a kiss. It carries something dry and fragrant sun-baked stone, distant wild thyme, maybe even the ghost of sea air, though the coast is miles away. Lucius closes his eyes and lifts his face to the sky. That, he says, is the Auster, the southern wind. He says it with respect, almost reverence. In Rome, they feared it a little, said it made people restless. But here, he opens his eyes again. I think it just brings change. Not loud change, just enough to make the leaves turn. You both stand in the middle of a small courtyard now, where the flagstones are warm and flat beneath your feet. A circular well sits at the center, surrounded by a low wall overgrown with moss and dried honeysuckle. Lucius moves to it and rests both hands on the edge. There was an old woman in the village, he says, who believed each wind had a mood and a memory. She'd sit under the fig tree with her eyes closed and say, "Ah, today the wind remembers something from Egypt." He chuckles quietly. I thought she was mad. But now, he trails off, tilting his head toward the breeze. Now you're not so sure either. The wind picks up just slightly, enough to make the grapevines rustle. The dry leaves click softly like whispers, and the worn linen of your tunic flutter around your ankles. Lucius reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small strip of dyed cloth sun-faded blue. He walks to a wooden post near the wall and ties it to the top, letting it stream out into the breeze. I keep a different color for each direction, he says. North gets green, east is pale yellow, south always blue, like distant sea. The cloth flaps softly, barely moving. You step beside him and close your eyes too. The warmth of the stones beneath you, the sound of the wind in the ivy, the distant hum of a bee passing overhead it, all feels like the beginning of a story you've already heard 100 times but never finished. Lucius breaks the silence again, just as gently. The Greeks used to think winds were gods each with their own temperament. Boreas cold and proud, Zephyrus soft and young. Not sure what they called Auster. He smiles. I just call him friend. He starts walking again, and you follow through a grove of thin cypress trees. Their shadows slice the ground into long, graceful lines. The wind dances between them, curling low near the roots, then rushing upward like a quiet gasp. You stop beneath one tree whose trunk bends slightly, as though caught in permanent memory of a single windy afternoon. Lucius touches it, fingers pressing lightly against the bark. They bend, he says, but they remember. You walk in silence for a while longer, letting the Auster wind accompany you like a third companion, never ahead, never behind, always beside. Eventually, the path curves back toward the villa, and you find yourself approaching a small wooden structure tucked beside a stone outbuilding. It looks like a weather, shelter open on 3 sides, shaded, with slatted walls that filter the sun into bars of light. Inside are hanging pieces of cloth ribbons, streamers, and thin leather strips, each one tied to a rafter and left to respond to the breeze. Lucius steps inside. This is my wind reader, he says. I sit here and let the cloth do the talking. He sits cross-legged on a flat cushion. You join him. Together, you watch the ribbons lift, sway, tremble, and rest. One catches the breeze and lifts straight out like a ship's sail. Another twists gently. A third barely moves at all. I used to think I needed to understand everything, Lucius murmurs. Then I started watching the wind and realized it's better to appreciate than explain. One of the longer ribbons twists into a spiral, then uncurls. Lucius watches it, his eyes soft. See that? That's what I call a decision wind. Doesn't know if it wants to stay or leave. You both laugh, barely louder than the breeze. It would be easy to fall asleep here, you realize. On this cushion, with the wind gently rocking the ribbons, the cypress trees murmuring outside, and the warm scent of rosemary and old wood rising around you. And maybe that's the whole point. To reach a place where you're so deeply at ease that the wind becomes something you can read. Not in words, not in meanings, but in movement, and hush, and air that knows how to arrive and how to leave. Scholars still puzzle over Roman weather belief show much was myth, how much was metaphor. But here, with blue cloth fluttering and ribbons telling tales, it's clear the ancients knew something we've forgotten. That peace can ride in on the quietest wind, and that sometimes it's enough just to notice which way it came from. Lucius leans back on his hands and closes his eyes again. "The Oster's going west today," he says softly. And for a moment, the world listens. The wind reader fades behind you as Lucius leads you back toward the inner part of the villa. You walk slowly, now each footfall an invitation to pause. Your limbs feel heavier, not from weariness but from contentment, like your body knows it's allowed to rest here. The air grows still again. The Oster breeze has wandered off, perhaps to rustle someone else's vines, and in its absence, everything grows softer. Even the sounds birds in the distance, the echo of your steps, the occasional creak of a wooden shutter seem to respect the hush. Lucius turns toward a shaded corridor, half hidden beneath an arch of jasmine and climbing ivy. "This way," he says, voice quiet, "to the pillow room." The words themselves feel soothing. You follow him inside. It takes a moment for your eyes to adjust. The light is dim, filtered through pale linen curtains that flutter only slightly. The room is large, but it doesn't feel grand. It feels close, cocooned. The walls are smooth, painted with gentle earth tone soaker. Faded rose, a mossy green near the base. There's no furniture except for low tables and the pillows. Dozens of them. Pillows of every shape and size, arranged in cozy clusters along the floor. Some are faded, their embroidery worn thin by many restful heads. Others are newer, their linen cases still holding the faint scent of olive oil soap. You immediately feel the urge to sink into them. Lucius gestures for you to choose any you like. You lower yourself onto a pile near the corner, where the sunlight filters in golden and warm. The pillows sigh beneath your weight. Lucius doesn't sit right away. He walks over to a low shelf and selects a small lamp. It's made of clay, carved with a simple swirl pattern and filled with perfumed oil. "Sage and rose," he says. "So the room smells like memory." He lights the wick, and a tiny flame flickers to life, casting soft shadows against the curved ceiling. The scent reaches you slowly, winding through the room like a gentle story. Lucius settles onto a cushion across from you, crossing his legs and resting his hands in his lap. "No one talks in here," he says quietly, "unless they have something worth whispering." You nod. The room invites stillness. Even your breath begins to change longer, deeper, quieter. You notice small details you might otherwise miss. The embroidered edge of a nearby cushion shaped like olive leaves. The way the lamp's flame dances inside the curved shell of a bronze dish. The faint rustle of linen as Lucius adjusts his seat. He reaches over to a tall jar beside him and pulls out a folded piece of cloth. Carefully, he unrolls it across his lap. It's a tapestry small, square, the kind that might hang above a child's bed. The image is simple but intricate. A series of interlocking spirals made of tiny dyed threads, each one fading slightly into the next. "I wove this," he murmurs, "over 3 winters." He runs his fingers over the pattern. No plan, just followed where the thread wanted to go. You lean forward slightly to see better. The tapestry doesn't tell a story exactly, it hums one. Its colors shift from deep red to dusty blue to muted gold. A palette not of drama, but of dreams. He places it gently between you. "Some people think only great art survives," Lucius says. "But I think the quiet things like this go deeper. They live in air and memory. You forget them until one day they return in a scent, or a song, or a shadow. You trace one of the spirals with your eyes. It winds inward, then outward, like the kind of thought you follow just before sleep." Lucius reaches for another item, a folded piece of parchment tucked under a pillow. He opens it to reveal a sketch of a reclining cat, limbs sprawled in perfect relaxation. The lines are simple but masterful. You can feel the softness of the fur just by looking. "That's Mina," he says. "She used to nap in this room before I did." He taps the cat's tail with a fingertip. "She'd settle onto a stack of cushions and sigh like a person who's finally off duty. You can almost hear it. The room holds echoes of many naps. Not just sleep, but deep rest. The kind that doesn't ask for anything. The kind that isn't even always about closing your eyes. It's about releasing whatever you're carrying, even if just for a while." Lucius stretches out fully now, arms behind his head, legs extended over the pillows. "You don't have to sleep," he says. "But if you do, the room will understand." You copy him, slowly reclining, letting the pillows catch you in a way that feels uncannily precise. Like they've been waiting for your exact weight, your particular shape. The scent of sage and rose deepens. A breeze slips in through the linen curtains, just a faint one. It lifts a corner of the tapestry, then lets it fall again. The lamp flickers gently in response. Lucius speaks one last time, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you know," he says, "some ancient Romans believed that dreams were messages from the other side of sleep, but not prophecies, just soft suggestions." He smiles with his eyes closed. "I always liked that." Scholars still debate the role of dreams in Roman culture omens, divine messages, warnings. But here in the pillow room, with its soft lamps, sighing fabrics, and unspoken understanding, dreams don't need to be interpreted. They just need to be allowed. You close your eyes, not to fall asleep, necessarily, just to listen better, to the hush, to the breath of the room, to the story the tapestry hums quietly to itself. Somewhere in the stillness, a bell sounds slow, distant, and round like the echo of a thought. You open your eyes. Lucius is already sitting up, his back straight, his eyes soft with the kind of rest that doesn't require sleep. He smiles when he sees you stir and rises slowly, stretching with the ease of someone who's mastered the art of transition. "No rush," he says, "but there's a place I'd like you to see. It's where I go when I feel too awake." You smile, because that somehow makes perfect sense. You follow him through a side passage lined with cool, smooth stones. The walls are unadorned, but the light plays along them in shifting patterns, reflections from some unseen surface, perhaps a pond or distant fountain. At the end of the corridor, A simple wooden door stands open. Beyond it, the outdoors again. You step into the warm air and find yourself in a small olive grove, the trees spaced just far enough apart for light to wander through in wide, slanting beams. Their trunks twist in quiet conversation with time, and beneath them the earth is soft, scattered with dry leaves and the occasional sleeping lizard. Lucius walks slowly, his sandals barely disturbing the silence. You follow in kind. In the distance, you see it the philosopher's bench. It's not ornate, just a long slab of marble resting atop two sturdy stone bases, smoothed by centuries of thinkers sitting, pondering, and forgetting what they were trying to ponder in the first place. Lucius sits on one end, patting the spot beside him. "This is where I like to not make decisions," he says with a grin. You sit. The air here is different, cooler somehow, even though the sun is out. Maybe it's the shade from the olives. Maybe it's the hush of the stones. Maybe it's the weight of all the thoughts that have ever sat here. He leans back against the curve of the bench and folds his hands. "Once, 3 old friends and I came here to settle something very important," he begins. "We wanted to know if bees dream." You turn to look at him, smiling. "Yes," he continues with absolute seriousness. "I said yes, obviously. How could a creature that dances and naps in flowers not dream?" He tilts his head thoughtfully. "One of the others said dreams require language. The third said bees are too busy to dream. The fourth just snored through the entire conversation." Lucius laughs gently at the memory. "In the end, we took a vote and decided that if bees dream, they probably dream of warmer mornings. You imagine it now. 4 older men sitting exactly where you are, their sandals dusty, their robes creased, their minds wandering through the softest questions. This bench wasn't built for resolutions. It was built for wonder. You stretch your legs out and lean your head back, the smooth stone cooling the back of your neck. You can hear the olive leaves rustling above. They make a sound like distant applause, quiet, reverent, as if celebrating your choice to simply be here." Lucius reaches into the folds of his robe and pulls out a small wooden box. From it, he removes a tiny scroll bound with a thread the color of old gold. "Sometimes I write things down that I'm not sure I believe," he says, "just to see how they feel in ink." He unties the thread and unfurls the scroll carefully. "All thoughts deserve a little sun," he reads aloud. "Wrote that years ago. Didn't know what it meant until I read it here." He hands you the scroll. The ink has faded slightly, the script careful but unpretentious. You run your fingers over the surface is soft, worn, barely there. You hand it back, and he rolls it up again with care. "I think people try too hard to make thoughts permanent," he says. "But sometimes it's enough just to think them, let them rest in the air like dew." You close your eyes again, not from tiredness, but to listen better. In the silence, you hear a dove calling from somewhere behind the grove, the faint hiss of wind moving through dry grass, the creak of the olive trunk as it sways, just slightly. Lucius speaks again, barely above a whisper. There's something comforting about places where people have sat quietly for centuries, as if every pause is remembered somehow. You look down at the stone beneath you. There's a tiny notch where someone's hand might have rested, a smooth groove that could have been the seat of a restless foot or a thoughtful thumb. Lucius notices you looking. "Marcus used to sit right there," he says. He was convinced that olives grow better when you recite poetry to them. You raise an eyebrow. Oh yes, Lucius says, eyes twinkling. He'd recite old verses about moonlight and rivers and swear the trees leaned closer. He chuckles. I think he may have been right. The olive trees sway in unison now, a soft rustling like the turning of an ancient page. Scholars still debate whether Roman philosophers were truly idle or simply thoughtful in disguise. But on this bench, with the scent of warm leaves, the gentle tick of time, and the possibility of dreaming bees, you understand. Idleness can be sacred too. You sit back fully now, hands resting at your sides, thoughts drifting somewhere between curiosity and peace. Want to hear a secret? Lucius says. You nod. Sometimes, he says, voice low, I come here and ask the trees questions I don't want answered. You smile. Not everything needs solving. Some things are best left to the leaves, and the breeze, and the bench that remembers. The afternoon is sliding softly into stillness now, not fading, not rushing, just shifting its weight, like a cat curling into a different position on a warm tile floor. Lucius rises from the philosopher's bench with a contented sigh and stretches, arms lifted just enough to greet the changing light. You follow his lead. Your legs are slow to respond, not from stiffness but from the simple reluctance to leave the calm of that old marble seat. As you walk away, you glance back once. The bench seems to exhale in your absence, quietly grateful for your pause. Lucius leads you toward the town. Not far, just a stroll through a gentle rise of olive and laurel trees, down a path made soft by centuries of sandals. As you crest a low hill, rooftops appear terracotta tiled, sun-warmed, scattered like the tops of clay jars beneath the sky. The town isn't bustling, it doesn't bustle, it rests. As if every building, every door, every stairway had learned long ago that afternoons are best spent slowly. You walk beside Lucius down a winding path of worn cobblestones, shaded here and there by archways strung with vines. A cat dozes on a wooden windowsill. Its ears twitch occasionally, but it makes no move to acknowledge you. There is no threat, no alarm, just drowsy acceptance. Nap hour, Lucius murmurs, nodding at the stillness. He's right. The whole town has given itself over to slowness. Doors are ajar, not open. Shutters half closed, not shut. The market stalls, earlier filled with figs and jars of olives, are now empty except for a stray basket or two left out in trust. You hear a distant sound, a soft bell, ringing once, maybe twice. That's not a signal, Lucius says. Just the bell maker testing his work. You smile at the thought. Even bells, here, seem to nap between moments of sound. A dog lies across the path ahead, tail thumping once in lazy acknowledgement. Lucius steps over it. So do you. The dog doesn't stir beyond a slow blink, content in the coolness of the stone. The air smells of warm dust, dried fruit, and faintly something floral drifting from a balcony above. You look up and see a curtain swaying gently, someone's sandal resting just beyond the threshold. A woman sits there, not moving, not speaking, just being. Lucius pauses beside a small well. The water within reflects the light like a silver coin lying flat. He drops a pebble in. The ripples spread outward, then settle. The silence reasserts itself. This town, he says quietly, reminds people how to breathe. You feel it. Your own breath has slowed, not by force, but by invitation. The rhythm of the shutters, the slow curls of cooking smoke, the echo of your own steps on the stone, it all seems to align with your chest. You pass a shop with a painted sign. Candles, charcoal, ink. Its door is open, but no one stands behind the counter. A faint trail of lavender-scented smoke escapes through the window. Lucius stops beside a low stone bench built into the wall of a nearby home. "Here's my favorite place to do nothing," he says, settling onto the bench and patting the space beside him. You sit. The bench is cool beneath you, and the wall behind holds the day's heat like a gentle memory. Across the narrow path, a vine of wisteria hangs over a wooden pergola, its blossoms swaying faintly, as if humming a song you've never heard. Lucius leans back, looking up at the ceiling of vines. "Did you know," he says, "the baker once closed his shop for an entire week just to watch his daughter learn how to walk?" He smiles. No announcement, no sign, just a closed door and a town that said, "Of course." You look around, that story doesn't surprise you. Not here, not in this town that naps. A boy walks by carrying a basket nearly as big as he is, filled with rosemary and small loaves wrapped in cloth. He doesn't hurry. He pauses to pet the dozing dog, then continues down the lane, whistling softly. Lucius watches him pass, then turns to you. "When I was young," he says, "I thought stillness was something you earned, that you had to do enough before you were allowed to rest." He shrugs. "Turns out, rest is where the good thinking happens, maybe even the good living." You don't reply. You don't need to. The shutters across the lane close with a soft click. A pigeon coos once from the rooftop above. The town seems to settle even deeper into itself. You close your eyes not fully, just enough to see the glow of the sun behind your lids. You hear the same sounds Lucius hears. A distant splash from a water jug, a spoon clinking softly against clay, the faint creak of a door opened just far enough for air to pass through. Scholars rarely write about this part of Roman life. They record the debates, the monuments, the conquests, but they miss the nap hours, the hum of heat in stone, the conversations that happen in sighs and shared shade. Lucius, though, remembers. He has built his life on the memory of them. And now, sitting on this quiet bench in a sleepy lane with vines overhead and time moving like warm syrup, so do you. As you and Lucius rise from the quiet bench beneath the wisteria, he pauses briefly to brush a fallen blossom from your shoulder. It lands on the cobblestones with a soft whisper, barely a sound, more like the idea of one. You turn down another lane, narrower this time, the path curving gently like a line drawn absent-mindedly in the sand. Every surface seems warmed from within. Stone walls dappled with shadow, windowsills kissed by sun, terracotta pots radiating faint, earthy heat. The sound of water draws you forward, not loud, not urgent, a kind of patient, trickling, like something that's been flowing long before your arrival and will continue long after. Lucius gestures ahead. "It's time I show you the whispering fountain." You follow him beneath a low arch where vines have wrapped the stones in soft green tendrils. Just beyond it is a small courtyard enclosed on three sides by smooth stucco walls painted pale apricot and faded teal. At its center, a modest mosaic fountain no taller than your knee. It's not grand, not marble, but it's captivating. The basin is ringed in tiny tiles, blues and greens arranged in spirals and waves. The water emerges from a lion's mouth set into the wall, but the lion's expression is not fierce, it's serene, nearly smiling. as if it, too, has nothing left to prove. The trickle of water is soft enough that you have to get close to really hear it. And when you do, it changes. It isn't just trickling, it's murmuring. Lucius crouches beside it and runs a hand lightly across the basin's rim. This fountain was designed to speak, he says. Not in words, of course. In textures, in rhythms. You crouch beside him. He points to the lion's mouth. If you listen long enough, the sound begins to loop. Not perfectly, not in patterns you can predict, but just enough that your mind starts to think it hears something. You listen. At first, it's just water. Then it's something like breathing. Then, maybe, something like sighing. Then back to water again. Lucius smiles. That's why I call it the whispering fountain. It always seems to be remembering something. The tiles at the bottom glimmer in the light. Small coins sit among the stonesome tarnished, some shiny, some so old they look like part of the mosaic now. People toss in coins, Lucius says. Not for wishes, just as a way of saying thank you. He reaches into a pouch and hands you a small, flat stone. This one's better than a coin. Found it near the edge of the sea. Smooth enough to dream on. You drop the stone into the water. It lands silently, vanishing for a moment before settling on the mosaic floor. The ripples spread outward in slow circles, colliding with the edges of the fountain, then curling back toward the center. Lucius watches them closely. Sometimes I sit here for hours, he murmurs. Not thinking, just letting the sound do the thinking for me. He leans against the low wall of the courtyard, his legs stretched out, eyes half-lidded. There's something kind about water, he says. It doesn't hold grudges, it just keeps moving. You sit beside him, the fountain between you. The sound continues, still a trickle, still a murmur. But now, somehow, it seems to have taken your thoughts with it carried them off, like pebbles tumbling downstream. Above you, a branch from a nearby fig tree stretches into the courtyard. One ripe fig hangs from it, casting a small shadow over the lion's carved brow. Lucius points. That fig's been hanging there for days, he says. The tree knows when to let go, just like the fountain knows when to fall quiet. He's right. As the breeze shifts, the fig wobbles slightly, then steadies itself. The fountain trickles on. A tiny lizard scampers across the sunlit stones, pauses to drink from the edge, then darts away again without ceremony. You trace a line in the dust beside your foot, just a circle, then another. The kind of idle drawing people do when they're completely present. Lucius is watching the fountain again, and his voice, when it comes, is more whisper than speech. There's an old story, he says, about a man who listened to a spring every day of his life, hoping it would one day say his name. You turn to him, curious. He never heard it, Lucius says. But the story ends like this. He never stopped listening, and that was enough. You sit with that thought for a while. It doesn't ask anything of you. It doesn't demand interpretation. It just rests beside you like a sleepy cat. Scholars may overlook fountains like this too small, too simple, too private. But Lucius knows what they're for. And now, so do you. You close your eyes. The sound of water continues. Not louder, not clearer, but deeper somehow. Like the fountain now knows you're listening. Lucius rises at last and stretches again. Bones making soft, satisfying pops. The sun's starting to soften, he says. Time for lamps soon. You glance at the fountain one last time as you stand. The lion, unchanged, still offers its whisper to anyone willing to pause. And you walk away slowly, carrying the sound with you, not in your ears, but in your breath. The sky has begun to melt into that pale, in-between color, neither day nor dusk, just the quiet prelude to both. Shadows lengthen across the flagstones as you and Lucius walk side by side, the hush of the fountain still lingering behind you like a lullaby remembered too late to hum. You take a familiar turn back toward the hill that cradles the villa, but Lucius pauses and looks up. His gaze is fixed on the sky. "It's time," he says softly. "Time to look up again." You follow his eyes, and yes, there they are, the clouds. They've changed shape since earlier. Now they drift lower, broader. Some stretched wide like sails pulled softly across the sky. Others puffed into gentle towers, their edges kissed with pale orange. Lucius leads you to the same hillside where your journey began, and you settle into the grass without hesitation. The warmth from earlier still lingers in the soil, but the breeze is cooler, now less playful, more reflective. Above you, the clouds pass like thoughts you're not quite trying to remember. Lucius lies back on his elbows, looking up with the practiced ease of someone who's had a long, respectful relationship with the sky. "You see that one?" he says, pointing with a lazy finger. "That's Templum Nubium, the cloud temple. Always appears around this time of day. You can tell by the 3 peaks, right there and there." You squint. At first, it looks like just another cloud. Then, yes, 3 bumps like domes, a wide base, a suggestion of something solid in a world of drifting. "It's always a little different," Lucius adds. "But it remembers its shape, just like us." He reaches for his tablet, the clay one. Still smooth, still etched with the day's sky. He draws a small rectangle with curved lines above it. Just a gesture, a whisper of a temple, nothing precise. Just enough to say, "I saw you." The wind picks up slightly, brushing across your face. Not cold, not warm, just steady. Steady enough to move a thought gently across your mind. Lucius is looking up again. "That long one," he says. "That's Equus dormiens, the sleeping horse. He only appears when the day has done all it can." You follow his gesture. There it is long, curved, with a slight dip near one end like the fold of a leg. It floats without intention, like a nap mid-sentence. "I saw that cloud for the first time on my birthday," Lucius says. "About 40 years ago. It looked exactly the same, only now I think it moves slower." He chuckles. "Or maybe I've just learned to catch up with it." You lie back fully now, arms folded behind your head, the ground firm and forgiving beneath you. The clouds move above, the earth holds below, and everything in between feels quiet and good. Lucius points again. "Look, that one shaped like a tortoise holding a scroll." You don't see it at first, then you tilt your head slightly. "There it is." "How do you come up with these?" you ask softly. He shrugs. "I don't. They tell me." He makes another mark on the clay, a curved line, a small spiral, a dot. Then he sighs and leans back beside you. "My favorite clouds," he says, "are the ones that almost disappear before they finish forming, the ones that look like a thought you almost had." He closes his eyes, face turned to the breeze. We spend too much time chasing clarity. Clouds remind us that softness has its own shape. The sky above you darkens gently, the colors now washed in dusky peach and sleepy lavender. One cloud seems to stretch across the entire sky, a great, slow river flowing in a direction you cannot name. Lucius marks it simply, a long line. "I call that one vita lenta," he says, "the slow life." You don't speak, you just breathe, letting the name settle into your chest like warm tea. After a while, he opens his eyes and points to another high, wispy, dissolving at the edges. That's the messenger, Avis Vesperi. She comes only at the edge of dusk. He draws a half-winged shape on the tablet, barely visible. Scholars argue whether Romans named their clouds, Lucius murmurs. But I think we did. Just not officially. Not for the records, only for ourselves. He pauses. And maybe for the sky, in case it needed reminding. A soft laugh escapes him. Then, without any real warning, he says, "Would you like to name one?" You glance up. There's a cloud, drifting overhead. Large and soft, its edges billowed like a resting blanket. Its form, undefined but full of promise. It's beautiful not because of its shape, but because of how slowly it moves, like it's waiting. You think for a moment, then say, "Somnia Clara." Lucius smiles. "Clear dreams," he repeats. "A fine name." He presses the stylus into the clay and writes the words slowly, his hand steady. Then he draws a curved line to hold the name in place. "There," he says. "Now it will remember you." You watch the cloud fade into the darkening sky, its shape dissolving, even as your name for it holds gently in the clay. "Clouds are generous," Lucius says. "They don't ask us to remember, but they don't mind if we do." And there, beneath the slow clouds, with the scent of olive leaves in the air and the whisper of grass beneath your head, you begin to understand something. Not as a thought, not as a truth, but as a feeling that drifts quietly through you, soft and wide and deeply enough. The last of the sun has dipped behind the hills now, leaving only a warm glow clinging to the edge of the sky, like the memory of a yawn. You and Lucius remain on the hillside for a while longer, the clouds now barely visible, turned into vague silhouettes floating across the softening dusk. Neither of you speaks for several minutes. The quiet has settled like a blanket, heavy and gentle. Eventually, Lucius sits up, brushing some dried grass from his tunic. "There's one more thing I want to show you," he says. "Something I don't usually share." He stands, stretching slowly, then starts back toward the villa. You follow him without question. Your body moves easily now, like the muscles themselves have been gently steeped in calm. You pass through the garden again, dim now, the herbs curling into nighttime rest. The pillow room glows faintly through linen curtains. Somewhere a door closes with a low creak, not rushed, just final. Lucius leads you to a small, quiet corridor you haven't walked before. Its floor is mosaic dark blues and faded golds arranged in lazy spirals, like the clouds on his clay tablet. The walls hold shelves, and on the shelves, letters. Dozens of them, each one tied with a colored string, neatly stacked, waiting. Their edges are worn, their folds softened by time and touch. Lucius stops before a cedar wood chest resting at the end of the corridor. "This," he says gently, "is where I keep the letters I never sent." He opens the lid. Inside, the scent of cedar and ink rises dree and thoughtful. The smell of long afternoons spent writing slowly. He reaches in and lifts one letter from the pile. The parchment is creamy and faintly cracked at the corners. "This one," he says, "was to an old friend from my army days. We lost touch after the third campaign. I wrote him letters for 10 years, never mailed a single one. You glance at him. He doesn't seem sad, just full, like someone who's carried the weight of stories and found a way to place them gently down. I wrote not to be heard, he says, but to be still. He hands you the letter. The script is neat, deliberate, with wide margins and careful spacing. The ink is faded, but legible. We spent most of that week doing nothing, just counting turtles and guessing at weather. I wonder if you ever found a better place than that field with the old fig tree. I haven't. You hand it back. Lucius folds it carefully, as though the parchment might feel the touch, then ties it again with its thread-dark red, like dried petals. I've written letters to everyone, he says. Friends, strangers, clouds, even the wind. He pulls out another letter, this one tied in blue. This one's for a breeze I met in Rhodes, softest one I ever knew. He chuckles. You smile. Somehow, it feels perfectly reasonable to write to the wind, maybe even necessary. Lucius places the letters back in the chest, gently, then closes the lid. Most people think letters are meant to arrive, he says, but I think some are just meant to be written. That's the real arrival. He lingers beside the chest a moment longer, running one hand over its carved lid. Then he turns to you. Would you like to write one? He gestures toward a small alcove nearby. There, a simple desk waits, nothing grand, just a flat surface, a narrow drawer, and a clay pot filled with ink. A reed pen lies beside a stack of parchment squares, each one perfectly imperfect. You sit. He doesn't rush you, doesn't speak, just lights a small oil lamp, then steps away, leaving you with the hush and the chance. You pick up the reed pen. It feels natural in your hand, as if it knows you have something gentle to say. You write not a declaration, not a confession. Just a moment. A memory of walking beside clouds, a fig eaten under vines, the name of a breeze you can't quite spell, a quiet laugh that never needed a punchline. When you finish, you fold the parchment and tie it with a soft string from the drawer. You don't label it, you don't sign it. You simply place it in a shallow bowl beside the desk, already half filled with similar letters from other silent writers. Lucius returns. He picks up the bowl, gives it a brief nod, then places your letter gently into the cedar chest with the others. There, he says, now it's part of the quiet. You both stand for a while in the corridor of unspoken words, listening to the soft hum of a single night insect buzzing somewhere beyond the shutters. Scholars don't often mention letters like these. They're not political, not recorded, not preserved in museums. But perhaps they should be. They are the heartbeat of lives, lived slowly words with no need to echo, only to exist. Lucius places a hand lightly on your shoulder. You've written it now, he says. That's enough. And with that, you walk back into the evening air, the scent of cedar still gently clinging to your thoughts. Outside, the sky has slipped into its evening robe. Shades of plum and soft indigo curl around the rooftops, and the first stars begin to blink lazily above the villa's edge. You walk with Lucius across the flagstones, now cool underfoot, toward a side veranda that opens out into the dusky garden. As you pass under a wooden trellis woven with sleeping wisteria, Lucius reaches into a small clay pot and withdraws a taper already dipped in oil. He lights it with a practiced motion from the nearest lantern. The flame sputters once, then settles, a soft, golden halo. I've always loved this part of the evening, he says, when the light doesn't try too hard. He lights another taper, then another, working his way along a low stone shelf lined with small lamps, each different. Some round and squat, others tall and slender, each carved with simple, swirling patterns that cast slow-moving shadows against the walls. You help him. The wicks catch easily, and with each flicker, the world seems to soften further. The flames don't shout, they whisper, like old friends swapping secrets after everyone else has gone to bed. Lucius takes a brass lamp and holds it to his nose before lighting it. "Rose and sage oil," he says, inhaling deeply. "The same mixture my grandmother used. I still don't know her recipe, but I get close." The scent fills the veranda gently. Not overpowering, just enough to remind you of something you haven't remembered before. Warm hands, quiet voices, a door left open to let in the breeze. The night settles its weight across the villa, not like a blanket, but like an agreement. The air cools. The crickets begin to sing, not in chorus, but in scattered rhythm. The kind of sound that encourages thoughts to dissolve into mist. Lucius gestures toward a low wooden table near the steps. A small earthen jug rests there, along with 2 tiny cups and a folded cloth. You sit together, legs tucked beneath you, backs resting against thick cushions. He pours a clear liquid into both cups. The scent is light and herbal fennel, maybe, or anise. "Evening cordial," he says, helps the tongue forget what it's been trying to say all day. You sip. It's cool, with a soft sweetness and just a hint of warmth beneath the flavor. A slow exhale in liquid form. Lucius takes his time with his own cup, staring off toward the garden. "There used to be music here," he says after a moment. "Not grand performances, just a reed flute, a small lyre, one neighbor who played a clay drum so gently you barely knew you were swaying until your cup tipped." He chuckles quietly. "Now the music's elsewhere, but sometimes I think I still hear it, especially when the lamps are lit and the sage is burning just right. You listen, and while there is no flute tonight, no lyre, there's a harmony all the same. The clink of the ceramic jug, the hush of olive branches in the wind, a soft footstep from within the villa, the rustle of your own sleeve." Lucius sets his cup down and lights one final lamp, this one shaped like a tiny amphora. The flame is small, flickering inside the hollowed curve, casting its light upward like a miniature beacon. "I call this one the dream lamp," he says. You smile. "It doesn't do anything special," he adds, "but I like to think the dreams hover near it, waiting their turn." You lean back again. The night has grown deeper now, but not darker. The lamps have made a kind of hush light, painting everything in gold and softness. The stars above are clearer now, longer shy but fully present. One pulses gently, another seems to shimmer. Lucius follows your gaze. "Do you know what the ancients believed about stars?" he asks. "That they weren't fires, or distant suns, or even gods. They were pinholes in the sky's curtain, tiny tears through which the light of another world peeked through." He points upward. "I like that. The idea that something else is glowing just beyond." You sit together, saying little, the lamps flickering low. At one point, Lucius leans over and gently folds the cloth on the table, patting it once as if tucking in a child. "We never finish our evenings," he says. "We just let them fade." He stands slowly, stretching once more, and begins to snuff out the lamps, one by one. Each flame gives a brief sigh, then darkness takes its place as oft, velvety welcome. The garden returns to moonlight. Just the dream lamp remains. He leaves it burning. For the stars, he says. And maybe, you think, for you. Scholars rarely write about scented lamps, or the way twilight can feel like being wrapped in a memory. But Lucius remembers. And tonight, you do too. You carry the scent of rose and sage with you as you step quietly back through the veranda's arch, the night pressing gently against your shoulders like an old cloak rediscovered at just the right time. You follow Lucius down one final corridor, quiet as a sigh. The sky above has deepened into its truest version of night, a dark velvet scattered with stars so steady they feel older than time. The villa around you is half asleep, doors slightly ajar, shutters breathing, the air touched with the faint scent of cooled stone and jasmine. Lucius carries the dream lamp now, its flickering light throwing long shadows on the walls. He leads you back toward the garden's edge, where an open archway reveals the sky in its fullness. You return to the same low bench from earlier in the day. It's different now, draped in twilight, framed by stillness. You sit side by side once more, your bodies moving slowly, as though echoing the pace of the clouds above. There is only one cloud left in the sky. Lucius sees it first. There it is, he whispers, the final one. You follow his gaze, high above, drifting like a soft smudge of cream on midnight silk. A lone cloud moves across the stars. It doesn't hurry. It doesn't scatter. It floats as if it has all the time in the world, and maybe it does. Lucius leans back, resting the lamp between you on the bench. Sometimes, he says, I name the last cloud of the day. He tilts his head, studying it. Not every evening deserves one, but this one does. He glances at you. I think it should be yours to name. You smile. The cloud has no clear shape, no, it's part horse, part feather, part thought. Its edges melt even as you watch. You take a breath and say softly, Lentis. Lucius's smile widens. Slow one. Yes, perfect. He reaches for his tablet, still with him after all this time. The clay is nearly full now, etched with gentle marks and memories. But there's just enough space left at the edge for one more. He draws a single curve, a soft arc, open-ended. Then he presses in the stylus once, below it. Lentis. There, he says, voice barely louder than the breeze. Now the day has a closing line. The lamp flickers. You both lean back again, watching as Lentis continues its unhurried passage across the sky. The stars seem to blink in agreement, patient and kind. Lucius sighs. You know, there was a time I thought I'd spend my later years writing history, he says. Books, records, speeches no one needed. He chuckles quietly. But this, he gestures around. This is enough. A garden, a breeze, a visitor now and then. He closes his eyes for a moment. History doesn't always need to be remembered in scrolls. Sometimes, it just needs to be lived slowly enough to linger. A bird calls softly from a distant rooftop. One note, then silence again. Lucius sits up, gazing at the lamp. When I was younger, he says, I thought endings needed to be grand. But they don't. He touches the clay tablet with one finger, tracing the fresh mark. Sometimes an ending is just one last cloud. The breeze shifts again, cooler now, whispering through the fig trees. The leaves murmur like soft voices, repeating a lullaby that no one quite wrote down, but everyone somehow remembers. Lentis continues drifting. You sit with Lucius in the hush. No more words. Just the sky, just the breath between stars. Scholars, of course, rarely bother with final clouds. They prefer conclusions, events, declarations. But here, on this quiet bench beneath a cloud with your name in it, you understand what they're missing. Some days don't end. They taper, like candlelight, like a sentence left kindly unfinished. You watch Lentus until it fades, not disappearing, but blending into the dark above, where dreams are made not of stories, but of stillness. Lucius does not stand, nor do you. The dream lamp glows beside you, steady now. And above, the stars gather where the cloud once was. You stay on the bench a little longer, even after Lentus has fully vanished into the folds of night. Beside you, Lucius rests in a near stillness, the kind that belongs to someone who has spent a lifetime befriending silence. The dream lamp flickers one last time. Lucius finally rises, but gently, without disturbing the hush. "One more place," he says quietly. "If you're not already dreaming." You follow him through the sleeping villa. The stone under your feet feels cooler now, holding the memory of sun just beneath the surface. The air is thick with lavender and dust, and in the distance, a chorus of insects begins their slow, syncopated hymn. You pass the pillow room again. The curtains are still drawn, and the faint perfume of sage lingers. Then you pass the garden, time spiraled dark now, but still humming with its own secret geometry. Finally, you arrive at the open atrium. Here, there is no roof, just a square of sky framed by columns, each one wrapped in ivy that glows faintly under starlight. Cushions have been placed on the stone floor, soft and deep. A folded blanket rests beside them, as if someone knew you'd be here. Lucius places the dream lamp at the atrium's center. The flame casts long, gentle shadows upward, dancing softly across the smooth column faces. You sit, he sits. Neither of you says a word. The stars above are vivid now, not sharp, not blazing, just steady and ancient. You recognize a few, perhaps, or maybe you're simply seeing them the way they were always meant to be seen. Slowly, Lucius lies back, arms behind his head, eyes fixed upward. "They say," he begins, "that some Romans used to sleep under the stars so they could be reminded of how small their troubles really were." He turns his head slightly. "I think they just liked the way the night smelled." You both smile. A soft one, the kind you don't need to hold on to. The sound of the fountain drifts faintly in from the inner courtyard. Just a trickle, a hushed reminder that water still flows even when no one watches. The blanket at your side is warm from the stone. You pull it gently over your legs. One of the cushions sinks beneath you like an old friend wrapping its arms around your back. Above, a new cloud drifts into view. Lucius sees it too. "There," he whispers, "is Somnus Tardus, the late sleeper." You both laugh, nearly inaudibly. The breeze moves softly through the atrium, carrying the last notes of jasmine, the warmth of fig trees, the hush of unwritten letters. Every sound now seems further away, as if the world has lowered its voice. Lucius shifts slightly, his voice quieter still. "You've walked through the garden. You've named a cloud. You've left behind a letter that no one will ever read, but everyone might feel. What more could a day ask of you?" You close your eyes, and for a long time, you just listen. The distant crackle of a drying fig leaf, the whisper of ivy brushing a stone pillar, the faint exhale of the dream lamp's wick. Scholars won't record this night. It won't live in marble or ink, but it lives here in this breath, in this bench, in this moment where nothing needed to be earned. Lucius's voice drifts in again, like the breeze through an olive grove. Some stories end, he says. Others just fade into sleep. He doesn't speak again. You open your eyes once more. The sky is still there wider now, if that's possible. The stars haven't moved. Or maybe you've simply caught up with them. The last lamp burns low. You sink into the cushions. The breeze touches your forehead like a lullaby. Somewhere behind your eyes, images return clouds in the shape of temples, a sleeping dog, fig trees, unsent letters, soft footsteps through sun-warmed grass. And at last, slowly, softly, the day lets you go. You don't fall asleep. You drift. You taper. You exhale. A lantern glows gently beneath the stars. The garden dreams behind its walls. A bench remembers your name. The final cloud waits just a little longer before it too fades. Good night, sweet dreams.